but the insects can't go down inside there. But look how cool these are.
One of the accepted definitions is anything that was here prior to Europeans. So prior to the early 1500s, we generally consider to be a true native. The Europeans brought a lot of plants with them and established those plants like citrus and other crops for agriculture, to be able to sustain their colonies. And so those have been introduced. Some of them have naturalized here, but really wouldn't be considered a native plant. We look at pre-Columbian as native. The botanical garden, the definition of a botanical garden is one that involves education and research. So we want to have plants that are found all over the world. We want to emphasize diversity. We want to showcase plants that can grow here, but that come from other parts of the world. So no, not everything here is native, and we want to be able to bring in plants from other parts of the world to educate our visitors on. But what we've done here at our botanical garden is to try to include native plants in all of our displays. If we do have a native representative of orchids, we'll have natives. We've tried to keep the grounds in a natural setting, so it's not a very formal, highly manicured, high maintenance type garden. We don't find that to be one that's truly sustainable, and we want to also emphasize that greenness and that sustainability at the same time by using natives and less water and be judicious about our chemicals. But we want to try and keep as many natives on display throughout the garden as we can. So I think when you come here, you see that. You see that it's not real formal and every blade of grass just so. In fact, we don't really have a lot of grass. Yeah. I do think that if we can have a nice assortment of plants in an urban setting, different plants, whether they be native or not native, naturalized plants, that it will touch more people. What I mean by that is that there are a lot of plants that I would consider old-fashioned plants, plants that my grandmother grew, and plants that my grandmother's generation would connect with and say, oh, I remember that as a child. I used to pick that fruit in my grandfather's backyard. And so by having that type of community garden where everybody has some sort of stake or claim or memory to the plants.
Garden.
Absolutely, and I think that creates an atmosphere of exploration and creates an atmosphere of communication, because then you do have people telling stories of I remember when, and young people growing up, seeing plants that they may not have seen otherwise. I also think it's important, especially in an urban setting, to have as sustainable a garden as possible, meaning not a lot of heavy chemical or water use. You have issues of water being a non-renewable resource, and we have to be careful of how we use water, but also the chemicals. We can't have the chemicals getting out into the community, and we have to make sure and maintain and protect our pollinators. And so by using a lot of insecticides and pesticides, we're harming those beneficial insects as well. So if we could have something that's as natural and sustainable as possible, it's a good education for those who use it and see it as well. But it's important, I think, in those gardens to have vegetable gardens, to have something that they can in turn take from the ground and take back to their homes and use and eat. And so many of our kids grow up thinking that carrots come from the grocery store. They don't understand that they come from the soil, from labor, from sunshine and water and care. And if we can get kids connected to the soil, then they are more likely to be good stewards of their environment as they grow older, and I think they have a better understanding and a better appreciation of the world, the living world around them. So there's so many things that can come from this garden. Xeriscaping means I It's actually a trademarked name, and it was trademarked in the desert Southwest, essentially to use plants that were xeric in nature or dry loving, or those plants that were adapted to dry conditions, because in Southern California and other places in the desert Southwest, water is at a premium. So it was originally intended to talk about more cactus and succulents and low water required type plants. Now that definition has broadened to mean planting plants with like water requirements together, so that you don't have to irrigate an entire yard just because this group of plants needs water. So if you put all your ferns, your water-loving plants here, you can water those a little more often. All of your succulents and cactus in another area, you can water that less often. So it's more, again, looking at water use in this piece of property in a more sustainable way, so that you can irrigate zones as needed and not have to irrigate everything. So now that we've taken that a little bit broader definition, it makes sense. And what we've done here is we've planted plants with like requirements together so that we can irrigate judiciously. My thoughts and my understanding is that yes, trees, green plants will help to moderate the climate, will help to increase humidity, or help to make it so that the normal summertime patterns that we would see in our part of the state would be able to continue. I think with impervious surfaces and reflective surfaces from asphalt and buildings, that would actually increase the heat. If more green was there, more trees were there, I think the heat would probably decrease. Certainly one of the benefits, and something that I'm a little more familiar with, is how the soil and the ground would be affected. And that would be from any place you can have green space, you have less impervious surfaces. And when you have impervious surfaces, when you have roads and parking lots, you have water that falls on the ground that should be infiltrating into the ground and replenishing our aquifer, not doing that, running off the surface into the stormwater drains and being lost. And so the less impervious space, the more green space we have, the more water we're able to capture and not lose to evaporation or to runoff. And so that makes for a healthier system all the way around, because that water ends up being moved all over the state underground, and that's crucial. So I think temperature-wise, climate-wise, precipitation-wise, yes, green space is going to benefit us. A lot of the information that we can get about plants does tell us that. Tells us the type of zones or the type of ecosystems that they're native to, and so we can translate that. As long as we can find that a similar type habitat in both places, then we know that those plants would do well in both places. I know that Mexico is hugely diverse, climate-wise as well as elevation-wise, so we have a lot of things in common, but yeah, there's probably a lot of stuff they can grow that we can't, so, and vice versa. So just if you look at the state of Florida, what we grow in the north part of Florida is not the same as South Florida. And two very different zones and two very different types of native plants. So,
but it would be possible to identify.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. Flowers over here. This is our native sunflower. This is called a beach sunflower. We have a number of native sunflowers, but this is one of them. The beach sunflower is one that does grow along the beach, along the dunes, and is an important soil stabilizer. Nice for slopes, perfect for sunny areas, sandy areas, even salt areas that maybe don't get a lot of irrigation or fresh water. Once established, it's actually very easy to care for. A lot of our native insects and butterflies will use this as a nectar source as well, but it makes a good ground cover and definitely a wonderful plant for xeric, dry, sunny conditions. So the xeriscaping, dry plants, yeah, this is a good one.
So how often does it bloom, or what's the life?
It blooms all year round,
Okay.
which is nice.
Yeah.
It's in the wintertime can get hurt by a freeze, but will come right back. In fact, we had a hard freeze here in January, and all of this has come back since January. So
How about pollinization? Are the bees come to it? Or?
yes, they do.
Okay.
Yep. And in fact, you probably can see, if you sit here long enough, you probably can see a lot of pollinators, a lot of visitors.
So you actually planted them. They didn't just come up, or?
Planted them originally, yeah. The tall red flowers are native salvia. It's called tropical sage. It's actually not a sage, it's a salvia. And it's also an important butterfly nectar plant, but it's also an important plant for hummingbirds too. And it reseeds very easily, so once you plant the first one, then it reseeds and you really don't have to replant much at all. But again, very xeric adapted type plant. Mixed in with some of the low growing ones, you see it's actually quite attractive. It makes for kind of a wild look. Certainly you could plant these in a little more formal manner so that it looks less wild, but I kind of like the wild look here. This ground cover with the little purple flowers is very cute. This is one of our legumes. It's a mimosa, but you see it's a very delicate little vine as opposed to a tree. The flowers are really quite interesting, and kids love it because it looks like little pink powder puffs or pom-poms. If you touch the leaves will actually close up. It's called the sensitive plant. And I don't know if you can see this, but if I run my finger along, they close up. And again, kids like that. So this again is a wonderful ground cover. You see it grows right against the ground. It's easy to walk on. It doesn't hurt it to walk on it. Again, a good slope stabilizer. And this one actually does well in sun and shade. So it's a good kind of all-around multi-purpose plant. One of the other little ground covers we have, excuse me, is this one. Usually flowers in the spring and summer, may flower into the fall. See, it's again a very low growing one, little purple flowers, twin flower I think it's called. I'll actually have to look up the name just to double check there for you. But one that can fill in an area and add a little bit of interest. I think one of the things that's nice is to try and bring in as much different size and shaped leaves so that you have this interesting texture in the garden, so that when things aren't in flower or as things are coming in and out of flower, there's some interest. This muley grass is one of our native grasses, and it flowers in the fall, and it has beautiful kind of burgundy flowers. It's very attractive in the garden. So you see we have a nice mixture here. One of our native cycads, these are really quite primitive plants that were can grow in full sun as well as shade. This is our kunti, or our zamia is the genus, and this is a really wonderful, good landscaping plant. Evergreen, and makes a nice border, nice hedge. Again, drought tolerant. Just about everything in this area here is drought tolerant, and can't go wrong with that. The trees here, we have two different types of trees. The taller ones are Walter's viburnum. They flower in the spring with little tiny white flowers. Beautiful shade tree, real hardy trees. The smaller ones we've actually pruned more to a hedge shape, and they're just coming into flower. That's Simpson's stopper. So those you could grow them out like big trees or keep them small and in hedges. And both of these trees are really important for wildlife too, both for shelter and for the fruit, the berries.
How fast do they grow?
Pretty fast, yeah, pretty fast. On either side of the entrance here, we have the palmettos. The one on the left is a blue form, which is kind of unusual, and the one on the right is your more typical green form. Again, just great for wildlife, lots of hiding places there for birds and other organisms that need to keep away from predators. Really nice, drought tolerant, easy to take care of plants.